In this section, we're going to be turning our attention to the phenomenon of air pollution. Air pollution is defined as the introduction into the atmosphere of substances, either as solid particles, liquid droplets, or gases, that have harmful effects on humans, other living organisms, or the environment. In this section, we're going to be focusing on outdoor air pollution, and then in the next section, we will look at indoor air pollution. Outdoor air pollution can come from both natural and man made sources. Natural sources include dust storms, forest fires, and volcanic eruptions, whereas man made sources include vehicle emissions, mining, agriculture, and more. Our focus in this section will largely be on these man made sources of outdoor air pollution. We'll talk about some of the biggest pollutants and where they come from. First, though, there is some terminology that we need to understand when we're discussing and distinguishing between different types of air pollution. One distinct distinction is between stationary and mobile sources of pollution. Stationary sources, which are also known as point sources, emit pollution from a fixed location. Examples of stationary sources of air pollution would include power plants, mines, cropland, industrial manufacturing plants. And then there are mobile sources, also called non point sources, which emit pollution as they move from place to place. So these are largely forms of transportation, vehicles, ships, trains, aircraft, etc. We also need to distinguish between primary and secondary pollutants. Primary pollutants are released in a harmful form directly from their sources. So, for example, nitrogen dioxide is a toxic gas that is released in vehicle emissions. This is contrasted to secondary pollutants, which are produced when primary pollutants react with chemicals in the atmosphere. So, for example, ground level ozone is formed when solar energy causes chemical reactions to occur between normal components of the air and the primary pollutant nitrogen dioxide. So, the product of that reaction, ozone, is considered a secondary pollutant. And we'll get into this more in a moment, but remember from our previous section that ozone is a good thing up in the stratosphere, but direct contact with ozone is harmful for humans and living things in general. So, down at the ground level, it is a pollutant. So, now that we understand those terms, let's take a closer look at six of the most significant airborne pollutants. This list of six are called criteria pollutants by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Because the EPA has established air quality criteria for regulating the emission of these pollutants based on evidence about their effect on human health or the health of the environment. The six criteria pollutants are carbon monoxide, CO, nitrogen dioxide, NO2, ground level ozone, O3, sulfur dioxide, SO2, lead, Pb, and particulate matter, or PM. So let's look at these one by one, starting with carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas, which means that you can't tell if you're breathing carbon monoxide. And that's why people have carbon monoxide detectors in their homes. It's emitted from the burning of fossil fuels. It's a byproduct of that combustion reaction. In the US, most carbon monoxide emissions come from mobile sources, especially vehicle exhaust. And you may already know this, but carbon monoxide is harmful because inhaling it reduces your body's ability to deliver oxygen from the lungs to the tissues and organs. And at high levels, this effect can kill you. Next is nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide is a yellowish to reddish brown, foul smelling gas. Nitrogen dioxide's harmfulness is related to the fact that it is highly reactive. It also contributes to smog, as we'll see later in this section, and acid rain, as we will discuss in a future section. And nitrogen dioxide is actually just one of a larger group of harmful pollutants called nitrogen oxides, which are basically chemicals that include some combination of nitrogen and oxygen atoms. Other nitrogen oxides include NO, NO2, NO3, and others. But the most harmful ones are nitrogen dioxide and NO, or nitrogen monoxide. For the most part, nitrogen dioxides are produced from the burning of fossil fuels in vehicles, as well as for the purposes of electricity generation and industrial manufacturing. What you see in this image is the now decommissioned Navajo Generating Station, which was a coal fired power plant located in the northern part of the state. Coal power plants are a very significant source of nitrogen oxide pollution because there happens to be a lot of nitrogen in coal. Next is ground level ozone. Ozone is a colorless gas with a slightly sweet odor. And here we call this ground level ozone because not all ozone is bad. The ozone layer found in the stratosphere is critical for the ability of living organisms to survive on Earth because it absorbs harmful UVB and UVC radiation from the sun and prevents that energy from reaching the surface of the Earth and causing what would be devastating damage to living things. So, up there, ozone is good, but down here in the troposphere, ozone at the surface level or ground level is bad. Because ozone is highly reactive and causes cellular damage that can lead to a variety of health issues. Ground level ozone is actually a secondary pollutant that is created as a result from chemical reactions driven by sunlight, heat, and the primary pollutant nitrogen oxides, or with volatile organic compounds, which we will address a few slides from now. Because two of the ingredients for making ozone are sunlight and nitrogen oxides, hot, sunny urban areas are particularly at risk for high levels of ozone pollution. So, not surprisingly, the Phoenix metropolitan area has the fifth worst ozone pollution in the country, according to the American Lung Association. Next is sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is a colorless gas with a strong odor that is usually described as choking or suffocating. Most emissions, 73% of sulfur dioxide, are byproducts of burning fossil fuels at power plants, and another 20% are released from burning fossil fuels at manufacturing facilities. Another more minor source comes from high sulfur fuels that are used in trains, ships, and heavy equipment. Lead is our fifth criteria pollutant. Lead is a heavy metal that is found natural in the environment, and it's also present in man-made products. Previously, the most significant source of airborne lead was gasoline emissions, because gasoline used to contain lead. However, the EPA established regulations banning leaded gasoline, and this brought about a 95% reduction of airborne lead between 1980 and 1999. Today, the major source of airborne lead are aircraft fuel and metal and ore processing plants, an example of which is pictured here. Lastly, we have particulate matter, which is abbreviated PM. Particulate matter is a catch-all term for solid particles and liquid droplets that are suspended in the air. There are a wide variety of substances that can fall into this category, including acids, organic chemicals, metals, soil or dust particles, and pollen and spores. Particulate matter is very, very small, but nonetheless, the EPA divides particulate matter into two categories that are small and smaller. PM10, which is also called inhalable coarse particles, are particles that are about 2.5 and 10 micrometers in size. These particles usually come from dust that is kicked up from roads, farms, construction sites, and mines. And then PM 2.5 is even smaller. These particles are less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter, and they usually come from burning fossil fuels and waste. And to give you perspective on how small these are, a human hair is 50 to 70 micrometers in diameter. So the larger of the two particles is 5 to 7 times smaller, and the fine particles are 20 to 30 times smaller. The fine particles are so small that they can even pass through your lungs into your bloodstream and cause health effects, which we'll talk about in the next section. Before we get there, there are a couple more topics related to outdoor air pollution that we need to cover. One of those is volatile organic compounds, abbreviated as VOCs. We mentioned these briefly when talking about ozone. VOCs are carbon containing chemicals that are emitted as gases from natural and man made sources. Examples of some common VOCs include benzene, toluene, formaldehyde, vinyl chloride, chloroform, and phenol. Common household products where you can find these chemicals include paints, paint strippers, varnishes, cleaning and disinfecting products, and cosmetic products. And like I mentioned, in the next section, we'll be getting into the human health effects of these things. But just a couple more topics, one of which is smog. Smog is a mixture of air pollutants that form over urban areas as a result of burning fossil fuels. The word smog is a mashup of the words smoke and fog, and there are two different types of smog. Industrial smog is smog that is produced directly by the burning of fossil fuels, which emit carbon monoxide, sulfur oxides, and mercury that all combine to the smog. And then photochemical smog. You can kind of think about as secondary smog. In the same sense that we think about primary versus secondary pollutants, this is smog that is formed when sunlight initiates chemical reactions between primary pollutant and normal atmospheric chemicals. Photochemical smog is a blend of over 100 chemicals, but the major components are nitrogen oxides and ozone. Remember that nitrogen oxides are VOCs and VOCs are primary pollutants that will undergo chemical reactions when driven by sunlight to create ozone. Another component of photochemical smog that is generated similarly is peroxyacyl nitrates, or PANs, which form when sunlight causes VOCs to react with nitrogen oxide dioxide. And these PANs are harmful for living organisms to breathe. They cause mutations and respiratory problems, and they also reduce the efficiency at which plants perform photosynthesis, so they harm plant productivity. Lastly, a quick mention of toxic pollutants. Toxic pollutants are chemicals that are known or suspected to cause cancer or other serious health effects, which can include reproductive dysfunction or birth defects, or known to cause other harmful environmental effects as well. Some common examples include benzene, which is found in gasoline, perchloroethylene, which is emitted by some dry cleaning facilities, methylene chloride, which is found in solvents and paints, strippers, asbestos, which used to be and is still present in many old buildings and construction materials, and toluene, which is a component of paint thinners, glues, nail polish, and stain removers. In the next section, we will be going into more detail about the harms caused by air pollutants to human health and the impact of pollutants that we are exposed to indoors rather than outdoors as well.